This video took years to create. Months of my life to study and years after to process it and put into crisp insights. Most people think that MBA is about content, marketing, strategy, finance courses. And indeed, this is what you see in the curriculum. But here's the truth. This content that everyone is so focused on is only a tip of the iceberg. In reality, there are three fundamentally different layers of what MBA teaches you, and they may not be what you expect. Today, I'm gonna share everything I learned in all three. There will be lots of content. I prepared gazillion slides that you may already see somewhere here. So buckle up, and here's everything I learned on MBA. And first of all, I'm Elena. Nice to meet you. I'm 35. I'm manager in tech, mentor, and YouTuber, as you could have guessed. Originally from Russia, and now I live in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And I did my MBA in one and only, forever in my heart, Rotterdam School of Management. And in case you didn't know, full-time MBA is not just a huge life change. It's a significant investment. You need to pay for tuition. Usually you need to take a loan, which means additional expenses. You most likely need to relocate to another country. And I'm not even calculating your lost income for a year of full-time studying and not working. I did all that, and I'm super glad I did. But I also want to acknowledge that MBA is not for everyone, first of all. And second of all, a lot of people just don't have access to even an opportunity to do something like that. So today, I hope that you will grow from what I've learned with or without a business school. And who knows, maybe this will inspire you to go through this path in the same way that I did. First and foremost, MBA is a business degree, and the goal of it is to help you explore all of the different areas of business. Because even if we work in a company, usually we work in one function and we rarely have a chance to explore others. Learning all these different areas of business is what makes you a well-rounded professional, and this knowledge is what I put in the first layer, which is hard skills. And let's start with marketing, because everyone is a consumer and a customer, and everyone encounters marketing in their daily lives. And to be honest, this was, I think, the most misunderstood subject for me personally, because I'm from tech, I never worked in marketing, and I had this kind of impression, dilettante impression, that marketing is about how do you force people to buy what they don't need. But in reality, companies are creating and producing something that customer actually needs, and marketing is all about knowing who is your customer and what you as a company can actually offer them. How do you create value? How do you communicate value? How do you talk about it? How do you reach the customer who the product that your company creates is intended for? Because companies have a lot of value to bring to customers, but it's sometimes very hard to reach it, to bring this value to this customer. And also many companies are very product centric. And I think marketing is that function that shifts your perception from product centricity to customer centricity. So think about marketing as a strategic function that is absolutely essential for the success of your business. And effective marketing always starts with a thorough research. You need to truly, deeply know who is your customer, what are their behaviors, what is their demographic, what is their psychographic, everything you need to learn to profile them. How are they making choices? Who are the other competitors in the landscape? Who are the other companies that compete to close the same needs of your target customer? Is this a direct or indirect competition when they're not creating the same product, but they just close the same need, but in a different way? What are the strengths and what are the weaknesses of all of these rivals that you identify? And research is so important because it teaches us not to make assumptions, because marketing is something that we sometimes feel like we naturally understand it. It's very prone to assumptions. We kind of feel, okay, this is for this part and the target audience, and this is for that. That's why always trust the data. Actually, marketing is, I would say, one of the most, in reality, in modern world, data-driven functions of business. Now, if I want for you to remember one framework from the marketing course, it will be 4 Ps. Because once you understand your market, 4 Ps will help you execute your strategy. And the first P stands for product. What is this that you offer? What are the features of your product? What are the services? Branding, design, packaging, everything that goes into your offer. Second is price. What price customers are willing to pay for what you offer, and what price matches with your value proposition to these customers. The third one is place, which practically means distribution. How does your customer reach and access your product? What is your logistics? What is your coverage? What is your distribution approach? And the fourth one is promotion. How do you communicate? What is the value that you bring to your customer? And this part includes advertising, sales promotion, digital marketing, and many, many more. This framework gives you a practical, actionable checklist for any type of offering that you create. But keep in mind that all of these P's, all four, are interconnected with one another. And if you change something in one, there may be consequential changes in others. Marketing helps you decode your customers' minds. What they say is to know why behind the buy. The simplest example of it is when a person is going to a hardware store to buy a drill, they don't actually need a drill. The actual needs that they have, why they're doing this is they need holes in the walls. And understanding that, understanding what is the actual deep desire that your product is closing for the customer, this is where the actual leverage and the beauty of marketing is, because it goes beyond the numbers and beyond things like demographic. It's the level on which you empathize to your customer. Investigate the why is not only the way to predict the response of the customers, but also a starting point to design the experiences that they will resonate with the most. But you cannot prioritize all customers, and you need to make choices to focus your energy and your fire and your money and marketing budgets on the right customer group. And the most important and the most famous framework here is STP, which stands for segmentation, targeting, and positioning. In segmentation, you divide a broader market into distinctive groups that have similar characteristics between them. In targeting, you select to which of the segments do you want to actually serve based on attractiveness and based on the fit between the segments and your company's capabilities. And in positioning, you are crafting a clear and distinctive picture of your product or your brand in your customers' minds relative to the competitors. STP framework is where the marketing strategy actually comes alive, because money is not unlimited, and this is a framework that helps you choose where to invest the most. There are actually two types of marketing investments, and there is a short term, and you do it when you need to boost sales. And there is a long-term marketing investment, and you do it when you want to contribute to the long-term health of the brand. But what is brand? And I think there was a saying that brand is not a logo, it's a promise. Brand is all the set of the associations and different perceptions about the company in the mind of a consumer. Brand equity is a value premium, and strong brands, they create a very good customer loyalty, allow you to do more premium prices, and in general gives you such a massive long-term competitive advantage. Each brand has different elements, like the name, the logo, the packaging, the jingle sometimes. But apart from that, there are also brand associations. Like, what are the benefits that this brand gives? Or what is the user image? What is the person that is usually a consumer of this brand? When we look at a brand like that, we realize that every touch point with the customer is actually a potential branding opportunity. And sometimes investments in some brand-related things may not give you a payout in a short term, but strong, recognizable brands is an asset by itself, and it helps you in the long run. Marketing is so data-driven that you would not believe. And to speak the same language with these lovely people, you need to know a few things. Customer acquisition cost, customer lifetime value, conversion rates, brand awareness, market share, and the return on investment of the campaigns. This enables you to speak the language of business when discussing marketing. There is one part of marketing that I think is incredibly important, so I could not resist to include a small bit of it, and it is behavioral economy. Sometimes we think about our customers as a homo economus, a perfectly rational and self-interested agent by itself. And behavioral economy challenges that completely, because human decisions are systematically influenced by biases, by emotions, by social factors. We often our brain often takes mental shortcuts, which lead to us make mistakes and errors, but they are predictable mistakes and errors. So human decisions are often predictably irrational. Recognizing the gap between rational and irrational can be the key to your competitive marketing strategy. Behavioral economy is is widely applied in not only in marketing, it's applied in HR, it's applied in things like public policies, and this is exactly the area where I want to say that with a great power comes great responsibility. I think this is the only slide where I have an exclamation mark, because I think that this is that important. It is very powerful, but exactly because of that, it should be always applied ethically and always weighted the intent and the impacts that it will show on customer, or maybe sometimes on a society as a whole. And governing the ethical usage of these marketing practices is a responsibility of leadership. Now, we understand the consumer, we understand the market, and even a little bit of the human psychology. And the next question is, what do companies do with this knowledge? How do you use this knowledge to build a long-term plan of what your company should do? And the answer to that is strategy. Many people think that strategy is all about making a plan, which on MBA you learn that strategy is actually much more dynamic and integrated set of choices and trade-offs that your company is deliberately doing to achieve what they want to achieve. So it's not only about planning, it's about winning. Strategy requires for you to understand what is your unique position and aligning all of the parts of your organization with the common goal. Because many companies live by reacting to market forces, and this is where the biggest mindset shift is. Instead of that, you can use strategy to proactively shape the future of your organization. For example, what you should deliberately decide not to do because it is not aligned with your strategy. And also, strategy is known with having a lot of frameworks. There are like countless number of strategic frameworks, but I will share with you a few, the most important ones. But at the end of the day, it's all about when and what question to ask yourself. And before you can win anything, you need to understand the playing field. The good strategy always starts with the analysis of the battlefields that you are in. There are two most important frameworks there. The first is Porter's 5 Forces, and it's a really powerful one to analyze the industry structure and profitability. It is super easy to find, but keep in mind that you use it when you need to assess a long-term profitability of the industry that you're interested in. And when you need to understand a broader macroeconomical trends in the industry, you need PESTEL analysis, which is political, economical, social, technological, environmental, and legal factors. And here's what's important. You don't need to memorize it, or you don't need to know all of these strategic frameworks by heart, but you need to know that there are a variety of those that you can use depending on what type of investigation, strategic investigation, you need to do in your organization. So that was the external part. And now we go internal, because it is as important for a company to understand what are this company's strengths and weaknesses, what are the core competences and the unique things that you can use and leverage for your competitive advantage. And here the two biggest ones are the resource-based view, which basically explores your internal resources, capabilities, skills, branding, whatever is in there. And the second one is value chain analysis, which basically decomposes your value chain creation into steps, and you investigate in there what is the source of your potential advantage. So at this point, I want for you to remember that it's not enough to only look at the outside, what's happening in the market and the industry and global, but you also need to look inside, because the sustainable competitive advantage comes from the inside. And once you understand the outside and the inside, it comes the time to make choices. What do you bet on to give the most superior value to your customers? And there are multiple ways you can win in this game. The first one is cost leadership. Basically, you are competing to be the cheapest option for the customers in your niche. If you don't want to do that, you can always differentiate. So you can create a value proposition that will be not the cheapest, but that will be unique and different from the rest of your competitive landscape. And the big dream of any strategy expert is a blue ocean strategy, which is basically a absolutely new, uncontested marketing space where the competition is just irrelevant. And this is where you win by inventing and creating a completely new game altogether. But a brilliant strategy is absolutely useless without an effective implementation. So you need to bring your organization to actually execute this strategy. You need to align your organization with the strategy, the processes you have, people, incentives that these people receive. You need to manage change. Yes, change management, it's a nasty thing, it's not an easy thing, but it's very important. You shouldn't ignore it. How to address the resistance to some of the changes that new strategy can bring. And you need to be very clear about how you measure it, because otherwise you will never know if you've actually executed your strategy or not. So at the end of the day, strategy will help you winning the competition game, but you need to do the good analysis, you need to use the right frameworks, and you need to invest in the right execution of it. That's basically it. People think that strategy is incredibly complex, but that's not the case. There are very complex and advanced strategic frameworks, but in reality, you don't need to know and memorize and keep in mind all of those. You need to know when to use what. Now let's talk money. And many of us, even if we're not connected to the finance, the more we climb the corporate ladder, the more different elements of finance we unavoidably have in our job. And we kind of tend to think that finance is about the numbers, the budgets, or how much money do we need to pay for what. But today I want to suggest completely different narrative for you. Look at the finance as a story behind your value creation and kind of like a navigation system that will show you what is your current financial state and will help you evaluate every strategic decision that you're making in your company from the lens of profitability. There are traditionally two, let's say, types or parts of finance, very different from one another. And the one is accounting and statements, and the other one is financial management. Why do we need to learn accounting? Why do they even teach accounting and statements on MBA? And the thing is, especially statements which are based on how we do the accounting, it is a language of business. Financial statements are standardized reports that are showing you the financial state of the company over a particular period. It is standardized for a reason. It gives everyone a common language and common understanding and way of discussing and judging the financial position of any company. No big decisions in any company will happen without looking at these few financial statements. And accounting, to put it simply, I hope I will be forgiven by accountants for this simplification, are the rules of how all of the financial activity in the company is tracked for the data to feed then eventually the data to these statements that are used in the decision making. So look at the financial statements as a pulse of the business. And there are three main ones that you need to know. Three. That's it. I got three statements and that's it. I don't know if it's a good joke or a bad joke. Never mind. The first one is P&L, which stands for profit and loss. It's also called income statement, and it shows a financial performance of a company over a certain period. It basically tells you if company is profitable or not. It answers the question, is the business making money? The second one is balance sheet. It's not over the period, it's a snapshot of a financial position of the company at a specific moment in time. It shows what do you own and owe, assets and liabilities, together with equity. And it answers the question, what does the business owe and own? Literally right now. And the last one is cash flow statement, and it shows how much cash did you generate or use. And this one is critical because there are some very profitable companies that, because of how their financial processes and operational processes are organized, they can be short on cash. And this is a statement that will show you that. And it answers the question, where is my cash coming from and where it is going to? So knowing how to read and how to interpret these three financial statements will answer you 95% of the questions about the financial health of the company. And a small homework for you. It is very helpful to know in which exact part of the P&L statements you are sitting in right now. So where you work right now, your function. So check the P&L and find out where exactly inside the P&L you are sitting. Sometimes financial data as it is kind of not enough to make decisions out of it. Because you look at the sheer numbers and you're like, is it too much? Is it too little? You kind of don't know. That's why in finance there are a lot of different ratios. And it allows you to do actual meaningful comparisons between different companies or between the same company in different periods of time. Look at ratios as diagnostic tools, because through them you will see where is the green flag and where is the red flag. There are gazillion of those ratios, but most important are the profitability ratio. Basically answers the question, do you convert your sales into profits, in the best and the most effective way. Liquidity ratios that assess if you can meet your short-term obligations. Basically, can the company pay the bills that it currently has or need to pay? Solvency ratios, and it evaluates the long-term financial health and if the company is capable of paying, meeting the long-term debt. And the question is company reliant on debt too much? And efficiency ratios, how effectively we use our resources. For all of these ratios, there are so much more, and there are different benchmarks for different industries, and this is how you grasp actionable, tangible insights from these numbers. Now we're moving to financial management. And the first thing I want for you to grasp is time value of money, because it is the foundation of all financial decisions. And here it is. Money available today is worth more than the same amount in the future because of its earning potential. So if you're having 100 euros today, you can invest it for a year and you will get something more on top of this 100 euros, some interest. Versus if just a year from now you will be given 100 euros and you will only have this 100 euros. Gosh, it is so much harder to explain things like that in a plain, simple language compared to more elaborative and academic language that we learn it in. You need to understand the concept of compounding, very important one. It's basically earning interest based on the principal and the accumulated interest. So basically you have 100 euros right now, you earn some interest, and now you have 110, and the next time you will calculate the interest, it will be calculated not from 100 euro, but from 110. So it's kind of like the exponential interest. Super important concept for investing. And the second concept is discounting. We determine the present value of a future sum, which answers the question, how much is future payment worth to me today? Why do we need all that? Well, we use time value of money related concepts and approaches to evaluate the long-term investments, because we cannot just say we invest 100 euros today versus we invest the same 100 euros a year from now, because the value of money is different with time. So you consider this compounding and discounting effects to make a smarter and more precise financial decisions. The example of this usage is NPV, net present value. So imagine this. You want to start a project, a long, big project that will span for many years. You want to invest a lot of money in it, but you also want and hope to get a lot of money out of it. NPV will calculate, after accounting to all of those, the different values of money depending on when do you invest and all of that. It will basically calculate for you if your project is profitable or not, and does it make sense to do it from financial point of view. So if it's more than zero, then you're good. If it's less than zero, then you're not. Or you have internal rates of return, which shows you how good is the project by itself from the financial point of view. Or the simplest one is the payback period, which basically tells you how long it will take for you to get your initial investment back from the money that you generate from the project. And there is another one, but I promise this is the last one, and it is a cash conversion cycle. It simply shows how many days it takes for you to turn the money you spent into the cash on your bank account. And it is important because if it's very long, then it means you tie your cash somewhere else where you cannot use it for a really long time, and this can lead to liquidity problems. So as you can see, finance is kind of like a, how do you call it, like the panel dashboard in your car that shows, like the fuel and everything. And good experts in finance can practically look at your financial statements, look at some of those ratios, and tell you about your company much more than you yourself even realize. The next one is macroeconomy, and there is no company that exists in a vacuum, and we're all influenced by that. And it is kind of naive to ignore. I look at the macroeconomy as an invisible hand that affects all of the businesses in many different ways, because it influences demand on your products, the cost of labor, and even things like governmental regulations that also affect how we do business. Learning the most important concepts of macroeconomy shifts your perspective from a micro level, when you only look at everything that's happening in your organization, to a more holistic picture, which makes it more manageable. Just like a doctor is checking our vital signs when we go to a doctor, economists and business leaders are checking different key indicators, macroeconomy indicators, that shows them the health and the direction of certain economy. And three important concepts that you should know, illegal not to know, is the first one is GDP, stands for gross domestic products, and it is a total value of all of the goods and services that has been produced by a country in a certain period of time. And basically GDP tells you if the economy of a certain country is growing or shrinking. Then we have inflation, a rate at which a general level of prices is rising in the country. High inflation means that your money can buy less, which impacts the cost and impacts consumer demand. And unemployment rate, it is a percentage of the population that is jobless but actively seeking for a job. High unemployment means less consumer spending and more available labor, but also sometimes more social instability. Remember two concepts. First is monetary policy. It's basically actions that are taken by some countries and nations' central bank to influence the availability and cost of money. Monetary policy is a tool to control interest rates of the country. But what are the interest rates? Simply put, it's a cost of borrowing money or the reward for lending it. Because when you borrow money, you pay interest, and when you lend money, you earn interest. And central banks of many countries, they set their key policy rates, which then consequentially influences economy of these countries. And here's how it works. When interest rate rises, it makes borrowing money more expensive. And because of that, economic activity is slowing down. Because borrowing money to open business, to innovate, to do whatever is getting more expensive. And if interest rates are lower, it makes it cheaper to borrow money. It encourages people to take loans and invest in something. Spend more. It stimulates the economical activity and incentivizes people to save less and rather use this money, invest into something. And it is important for businesses in many ways, but the simplest one is it affects the cost of you as a business borrowing money and investing into something. Also, governments has a lot of power to make all kinds of decisions, including decisions on the taxation and decisions on government spending. Governments can make a decision to inject more or less money into the economy and stimulate or lower the demands, or they can decide to manage their taxes and, for example, lower the taxation, leaving more money for businesses and for consumers to use for something else. And none of these things are happening within one country. For many of the countries, they're part of the global economy, so what happens in one country affects another. That's why we need to know about the exchange rates, the value of one currency versus another. But this one, if you've traveled at least a little bit, we're all practically familiar with the concept from our regular life. There are different trade balances that exist in the world. There are countries that specialize on supplying different things to other countries and the other way around. And it's also helpful to keep an eye on global economic events, pandemics, major economic shifts, because it influences how people make decisions, it influences the purchasing power, it influences what government decides to do, and consequentially influences your business. Knowing at least these basics relevant to your company and your business will already set you apart from many competitors that are thinking still in a bubble of only what is happening in my company. So the next pillar is connected to business statistics. And I think this one is kind of misunderstood often. And also I hear managers saying, oh, I have a team of analytics. Why do I need to bother to learn how all of this is done myself? Which I'm telling you, if you don't, you can be fooled like a puppy. So it's very important to understand why it exists and at least some basics of how it works. Business statistics is all about transforming the raw data to the actionable insights that will help you make decisions. They say data is the oil, analytics is the engine. Data on its own is just simple numbers, but only when it's transformed through the statistical analysis, it becomes practically useful. The data goes through a few stages. You start with the raw data, and this is the inputs that you get. Then you're doing the statistical analysis, which helps you process your initial raw data. But that's not enough, because next you need to generate output from it to convert it in more usable information to finally feed it into the decision-making process. And if you'll remember only a few terms from business statistics, I would ask you to remember this. Statistics is broadly divided into three big components: descriptive, inferential, and statistical modeling. Descriptive statistics summarizes data to reveal patterns. If I have a sales data, I can look at it and I can see what is the average sales, I can see what is the most preferred product, etc., etc. This helps me understand what happened. For example, 64% of the customers preferred this type of product. Inferential statistics generalizes the findings that we found in the sample of data, in the small part of data, to make judgment about a larger population. Example of what I can get from inferential statistics is there is 95% chance that from 50 to 60% of customers will prefer this product. And in statistical modeling, we build equations that help us maybe predict what will happen with the future values or deeper explore the relationship between existing variables. But there is one concept that can reduce almost all of this previous work to complete zero, and it is the concept of data quality. The one thing to remember about data quality is garbage in, garbage out. If you have a poor data, garbage in, it will eventually lead to a poor analysis of this data. Garbage out. And often, even though we're not analysts ourselves, we are the ones who challenge it or who question if the data quality is good enough. We ask questions how the data has been gathered, where did it come from? We critically assess the reliability of the data. Now let's talk about how to make decisions based on all of the nice data that we've prepared, because for managers, making decision is basically the biggest part of our job. That's what we do. And in reality, we rarely have a perfect information at our disposal to make those decisions. An MBA gives you systematic ways to evaluate alternatives in a situation when the outcomes are uncertain or involve a lot of risks. And it helps us with the mindset shift from, okay, I follow the gut feeling in my decision making, to even if the data is imperfect and even if I don't have the full picture, I still use everything at my disposal to make the most informed decision possible. This way, we approach problems systematically, we quantify the outcomes, and we also align it with our level of risk appetite. And to do that, you can use one and only decision trees. It's a graphical way to visualize choices, the consequences of those choices, and also the chances, the probabilities of these events happening. There are also payoff tables, they summarize the outcomes of alternatives, but to be honest, in reality, I think decision trees are one of the most widely used, and I encourage you to learn how to read at least a simple decision tree, but ideally with some probabilities of events, because sometimes when you follow the probabilities and you follow the decision tree, it actually gives you the scenario that's your gut, that is counterintuitive, that was not what your gut feeling was telling you. We need to remember that risk is inherent in business. There is no such thing as riskless business. The worst thing that we can do is to just avoid and pretend that risks are not there. And although there are some risks that you cannot mitigate, you can only accept, but it doesn't mean that you don't analyze it. And the very first thing and the most basic thing that you can do is to distinguish between quantifiable risks, somewhere where you can calculate the probabilities and approach it in a certain way, from unquantifiable, which is basically just uncertainty. And if you know that, then you can decide what particular strategy you want to approach to your different risks. Finally, many business problems that we're working on and where we need to make decisions are associated with situations of scarcity, where we always have the scarce resources and we always need to maximize the profit from this situation. For that, we're using linear programming that helps us to find what is the best resource allocation. And you don't have to learn how to do this yourself, but what you need to know is how to formulate the problem. You need to formulate your objective, for example, maximize the profit, and you need to formulate your constraints, because all good analysis starts with the correct formulation of the objective and constraints. Now let's talk about the shining dream of so many business people, and it is innovation, the buzzword of last, I don't know, 70 years probably. And it's important to think about it as a fundamental process, because we sometimes tend to think about innovation as this part that sparks a creative idea and this is where it ends. But in reality, it's a process and even culture that needs to be managed and nurtured within organization. It's not a random act of genius, it's a strategic capability. You can innovate differently and in different places. So innovation requires strategy. You start with your business objectives. What do you you need to do. And this is where you see where do you need to innovate. You need a product or a process or whatever else. How to innovate. You can have internal R&D department, or some companies, they have a strategy of just acquiring other companies that innovate, and it also works for them. And finally, how much are you ready to invest in it? Look at innovations as a spectrum. On the one side, you have incremental innovations. You already have existing products, processes, and you're doing this incremental small improvements and innovations within something that is already there. And on the other side of spectrum, you have disruptive innovation. When you come up with new ways, new products, more affordable, more convenient for the clients. And usually it starts in a way that you serve it to a niche category, and then it can expand and create the whole industries around it. And none is better than the other. You need both for different purposes. And every innovation follows a certain process. Think about it as a pipeline. You start with the creation, the ideation. If you want for someone to come up with a great creative idea, it requires a certain culture, a certain atmosphere, a certain environment that it's on us to nurture and to create for people that we expect innovation from. Then you're doing idea selection. You're basically filtering from all of the big pool of the ideas which one are the most promising. And finally, implementation. You develop, you test, you commercialize. As you can see, innovation is a process, and it is a core business process, because maybe you will not feel tomorrow the downsides if you don't have it in your company, but year after year after year, if you don't have these processes that will allow you to innovate, you will lose your competitive advantage. One piece of advice for free. All of this is for free, but this costs even more. Do not kill your best ideas. Because unfortunately, a lot of fantastic innovations fail due to stupid reasons. Like, for example, short-term focus, fear of failure, or cultures where the failure is punished, time pressure, criticism, and many more. Be aware of that and don't let it destroy the idea that will bring you a lot of success in the future. All right, so we created innovative ideas and now we want to make it happen. So here comes operations. Operations is all about how do we turn our plans into products or services. It's basically about how do we make things done efficiently. If you want for a production to work in any way that production exists in your company, if it's products or services, you need to design, run, and constantly improve all of the operational processes that are associated with it. And for that, I will give you three things. The first one is process optimization. Process means how things are done. And you can map these processes, you can capture it, describe, write down, even graphically describe. There are all kinds of notations for that. And looking at this, you can spot what is the roadblock, where is the bottleneck, and find ways to make processes faster, cheaper, and better generally. This is practically what process optimization is about. Second is know what is your quality management. Because if you don't have a system in place to control what is the quality of the product or service that you provide to your company, then there is no chance that you will meet the customer's expectations because you just don't control it, and it will fluctuate and no one will be happy with that. And finally, resource efficiency. Because you have your materials, you have your machines, you have people that can work more or less efficiently. So when you're, for example, doing the process optimization, you can also see how it reflects on your resource efficiency. Now, let's talk about something that so many of us, even in my MBA cohort, a lot of people approached originally with, I would even say with some skepticism, and it is sustainability. Sustainability in business is not about just doing good or being green, whatever that term means. It's about having a company that lasts, makes real money, and helps the world at the same time. Company that turns big problems into big opportunities. Sustainability means understanding that big problems that exist around us in this world can either harm your business, hurt your business, or it can open up a lot of opportunities for you to make profit and solve these problems. Truly strong companies look at their business and the impacts of what they do through three lenses. Profit, how does the company make money? People, how is company treating people inside the company and outside? And planet, how is the company treats the world around it? Learning about true sustainability, not the greenwashing part of it, actually shifts your perception of what success of the business is. Because before, there was a notion that profit is the only one type of measure of if the business is successful. But it adds this additional layer through which you look at if the company is actually creating something valuable for others, and will it keep winning far in the future. And the key here is not to ask companies to sacrifice everything for the sake of sustainability, but is to look at where does this world's overlap. Imagine saving money by using less energy, or your customers are preferring you because they know that you treat your workers fairly, or you avoid big fines because you are careful with the pollution. These are all simplified but still examples of how sustainable activities can actually help your business. And for a long time, businesses were really focused on making money for their shareholders, and of course it still remains. But right now, the field of stakeholders that business has is much more wider. Businesses depend on and affect many more people than only shareholders. And it is customers, employees, people who supply you, local communities around your business. And if you ignore these groups, you can run into problems, unhappy customers, angry employees, supply chain issues, all variety of public backlashes that you can only imagine. You need to know about them and you need to build relationship with them instead of just plain old ignoring. And maybe one thing I want to specifically highlight is supply chain, because supply chain is such a painful and such an important area. There are still companies that operate under the impression that their supply chain is not their problem and not their responsibility. But this ship has sailed. This time has passed. Just this is how the modern business works. Your supply chain is part of your responsibility. And it is incredibly impactful. If you're actually managing a sustainable supply chain, it helps the environment, it helps with social issues literally on every step. But you also should be pragmatic and realistic about it. For example, it's very easy to criticize the practices that are happening somewhere in another less developed country, but the moment you open your factory there, you 100% follow the same practices that you criticized yesterday. Because in a global context, you cannot just impose your arbitrary standards of what you think is good and expect it to work. And often the goal is to be as fair and as human as it is possible within the context that you operate in. But all in all, you need to know where your raw materials are coming from, how they are made, and make sure that the process is as ethical as possible. Now let's talk about people, because many of us focus on money and business and plans, but who make all of those plans reality? It's people, and it's incredibly important to understand why people who work for us do what they do. You can and should learn how to spot problems with people and anticipate how they may react to changes. Because understanding people's needs and managing them effectively is arguably one of the most complex, difficult, but also the most rewarding part of leadership as it is. And first, learn what drives people. Learn about their motivations, what makes them want to work hard. Look at their perception, how they, not you, look at their job and the company, and learn about how they make choices. You can understand motivation better through some concepts. For example, everyone kind of knows Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where people need to fulfill basic needs before they will care about things like purpose or self-esteem. Or you have a fantastic Herzberg's theory, hope I pronounced the last name correctly, and it basically says that there are two different set of factors that boosts job satisfaction and drives job dissatisfaction. And by learning that, you will understand what truly energizes your team. And remember two things. First, people don't act based on facts, they act based on their perception of facts and their perception of reality. That's why it is important to frame things to people, because without it, no one will ever read the facts that you have in your mind. And learn how to spot biases inside your team and inside yourself as well, because we really like confirmation bias when we only notice things that are already aligned with our perception, or there is also the anchoring bias, is basically we remember and tend to trust the first thing that we saw, and we tend to think that this is basically the truth. Also, the teams are more than the sum of their parts, and every team is going through certain stages in their lives. It's unavoidable, it's just part of us being human and working in a team. Each team starts with forming. It's when we get to know each other, learn about each other, then we have storming when conflicts are arising, and it is unavoidable. And sometimes I see managers trying to block this stage as much as possible to conflicts, not to allow for conflicts to emerge, but to be honest, constructively processed conflicts can bring the team to a much higher performance than it could be if everyone just avoids difficult conversations. You have norming when the rules are getting settled, you have performing where the team is working at its best, and the closure, which is basically disbanding of the team. So every time you will look at different teams and think, oh, okay, this team is different, this is performing, this is not, keep in mind that there are different stages of maturity of even the same team. There is one saying from the organizational behavior course that I love the most, and it is, culture eats strategy for breakfast. In each company, you have a culture. Sometimes it's a deliberately designed culture, or sometimes the culture is just naturally emerged in an uncontrollable ways. But one way or another, it exists. And it exists in parallel with the structure, the actual organizational design of how the departments and all of the organizational units in the company are organized. Company structure is how the jobs are split, and company culture is basically the personality of the company. That includes all of the unwritten rules and values. Strong, productive, and positive corporate culture can help you, can make achievement of anything so much easier. And if you don't have it, the company will require much more involvement, let's say. Much more oversight. By the way, large organizations often have subcultures in specific departments or bubbles in the company that sometimes can even work against the main corporate culture. Now, what if you need to make a decision about how the organizational structure needs to look like in your company? And I will tell you that this decision should be a derivative from your company's strategy. You can set up the company or department in a million different ways. It can be more tall and it can be more flat. And it depends on what do you need. Because, for example, the tall, more vertical, hierarchical organizations are good when you need a strict control and efficiency, and more flat, decentralized structures are better for the speed and innovation. As a leader, you need to remember that you don't only derive a power from a description of your position in your signature in email. And there are actually multiple sources of power. There is also ability to reward, ability to punish. There is power derived from your knowledge and expertise, and also power of your respect and personal charm. Finally, all of us work with people and around people, and we need to know multiple different ways how to influence those people. And there are 4 main influential tactics. There is a rational persuasion when you appeal to facts, inspiration, appeal to values, consultation when you involve others, and coalition building when you get the support through the allies. So don't think just about how to manage tasks of others. Think about how to engage people and how to inspire people, because this will make your big plans happen and can create a great positive change for the company. Now let's summarize what we've learned in our first part. We've built a foundational toolkit, basically learning about how different parts of the business operates. We looked in the marketing, what is around us, the macroeconomy, how to manage the finances, how to work with the data. But also we discovered how to act on that understanding, craft strategies, drive innovation, make smart decisions, create a sustainable and lasting impact, and understand the people dynamics in all of that. We're done with, let's say, the most obvious part of MBA value and curriculum, which is hard skills. But we cannot become a truly effective leaders of the future without working on our soft skills. And this is the second part, the second layer of the value that MBA gives you. To be honest, in my opinion, it is underestimated. I had conversations with some people in my cohorts that genuinely struggle to understand why do we even need to invest in working on things like emotional intelligence and soft skills. But in reality, this is what differentiates mediocre manager from a great manager. And we start with your personal leadership development, because a path to leadership goes through self-discovery. And it's a little bit harder to translate this particular knowledge through the screen, because we spent incredible amounts of time working on self-discovery and the self-awareness exercises and all different ways of how we worked on our leadership development. But I will try to give you the best concepts and frameworks that can equip you to go through this journey yourself. Effective leadership starts with profound self-awareness, and it often implies asking ourselves and our peers a lot of uncomfortable questions sometimes. What is our strengths? What is our weaknesses? Reflect on our values. What makes us motivated? What actually truly drives us? What is the impact that we make on others? And for that, we can use different tools. We can use 360 feedback. We can use different self-assessments, personal reflections, and sometimes coaching. Coaching does help us in the discovery of these things about ourselves. And through things like that, we also train our emotional intelligence. Because leadership is not only about pure intellect, it's also about emotional intelligence, the ability to understand, recognize, and process your emotions, recognize emotions of other people, even influence emotions of others. Coaching is one of the mandatory skills for any leader. That's not a point for debate. It's just a fact. You don't have to be a certified coach, but you need to be able to have coaching conversations with your team. How do you train your emotional intelligence? Well, you practice it. You practice active listening, you practice empathy, you give others constructive feedback, and you actively ask for feedback about yourself. There is another part of leadership that seems like everyone is unhappy with, but this is just the reality. And being a leader means facing challenging interpersonal situations. All the time. We're having difficult conversations. We deliver constructive feedback. We mediate conflicts between others. All of these things we do. And we need to learn how to do it constructively, not freaking out ourselves every single time. And the answer to mastering that is simple and difficult at the same time. You need to practice it. You need to practice preparing for difficult conversations. You need to practice how to manage your emotions in the moment for you to be let's say, the fort of calmness when someone else is consumed by their emotions. Train yourself to frame messages positively and always focus on mutual understanding. And I know that it is uncomfortable, but the truth is, it's supposed to be uncomfortable. Going through this discomfort is a part of our job. I don't know if it makes it more easy or more difficult. For me, to be honest, reminding this to myself actually helps me. And we need to prioritize our own stability, prioritize you being stable. Focus on managing your stress and don't let it consume you. Because only if you keep yourself stable, you will be able to perform under pressure and help others to show their best work too. As a leader, you will be working with a whole variety of different people, of different experiences, backgrounds, people with different ideas. And it is our job to learn how to work with this diversity. I can talk for a separate hour about this topic, so for now I will just bring you the main terminology that I want for you to know. Diversity is when you bring very different people together. Inclusion is when you make them feel truly welcome. There are specific challenges with managing diverse teams, that's for sure, but the true power comes through enabling the cognitive diversity. When you have a team of people who are thinking very differently, different ideas, different ways of thinking, and ways of solving problems. Also, effective leadership requires a good skill of communication, and mastering this communication starts with, counterintuitively, problem solving. Because here's the thing, in reality, problems that we work on are rarely straightforward. And the first step on the path to a clear communication is to clarify the problem itself. You need to break down things to be able to explain them to others. Define the problem clearly, look at the symptoms and look at the root causes. Deconstruct it, make it smaller, make it more digestible, and then use hypothesis-based approach. Think about which hypothesis can help you test if this indeed is the problem and what type of solution would work for it. When you have the data, don't just share data. Tell the story through the data. When you present, develop a clear storyline. What's the problem? What's the analysis? What's the recommendation? Don't put your data in the center. Put your audience in the center. And critically look if your slides reinforce your key message or your message and what you want to convey is drowning in it. Some hygiene, ladies and gentlemen. Meetings are not time sinks. It should be a purpose-driven interaction. Every time you're going on a meeting, you need to know why are you doing this? What's the agenda? What are the objectives? who is responsible for what. And when you conclude, have clear next steps, owners, and deadlines. And I promise you, you will always have troublesome people who are having this weird dynamic in your meeting when you want to achieve something. So it's also good to learn the group dynamic practices, how to manage the team dynamics. Finally, you don't exist in your organization in a vacuum, and you can only achieve the goals that you have in front of you through your allies. Map your stakeholders, understand their interests, and gain their support. I will not elaborate on that. I recently did a huge 40-something minute video specifically on this topic, so go and watch it if you want to deep dive on this part. One of the biggest challenge for people who decide to do a full-time MBA like myself is to find the job afterwards, because you relocate to a different country, you give up your previous job, and you kind of do it because you want a different job. So a part of the MBA experience is how they help you and equip you in your career search. So here is the most concise learnings about career building and career search. And first of all, you may not want to hear this, but job search to a certain extent is a self-marketing exercise. You need to understand your value proposition, you need to understand your target markets, meaning the companies and the roles that you aim at, and effectively communicate your product, to this chosen market. You need to define what is your product. Basically, what do you have to offer to your future employers? What are your key strengths? What are your unique qualities that make you stand out? What problems do you genuinely love to solve? This is your personal value proposition. Then know your market. Don't just apply everywhere, but research companies and roles that fit your aspirations and your skills and your career goals, and craft your story. This one topic alone can take a solid hour for me to talk about. But the thing is, people remember stories much better than they remember facts. And if you will be able to put your career journey in a nice, exciting story, this will be your advantage for I don't know how many interviews that you will have until the rest of your career. I personally have multiple of those, and to give you an example, there is one fact from my personal biography that influenced a lot who I am as a person and how I work, and it is that I come from a family of engineers and physicists, so it's kind of this environment shaped me in a way. And sometimes I include this in my speech when I have the interviews, and these are the things that people eventually remember, and it is an absolute truth, but it took me some time to craft and fine-tune what and how I want to talk about in this personal storytellings. And when you look at your CV, don't just list your job description, but focus on your achievements and ideally support it with some numbers. And when you apply, customize your CV to the job, customize your cover letter to the job. There are always two job descriptions, the one that is in front of you and the one that is between the lines. So learn how to read between the lines what is the company wants and is looking for this position. What is the problems that they experience? What is the pains that they want to cover with this role? Mirror the language from the job, because the reality is a lot of the application processes is automated right now, and you want to pass the test of the automation just pre-screening your CV without even a human looking at it. And make sure that your LinkedIn profile is a more complete, more keywords rich version of your CV. Because in CV we need to keep it still concise, but on LinkedIn you can just go nuts. And when you got an interview, this is your moment to shine. So you need to learn with practice and preparation how to release the brakes. I really like this analogy, like the brakes in the car, because often we ourselves pressure ourselves so much that we cannot be present on the interview like an authentic selves, because we're too stressed and we're too uncomfortable, or sometimes we're too desperate because we really, really want this job, but we need to put our best efforts to let it go as much as possible, because it is an equivalent of kind of pulling the brakes. You just prevent yourself from having a good, nice interview experience. And usually MBA prepares you for two types of interviews. There is a behavioral interview with tell me about a time when types of questions, and there is the case interview with when you are given a case study that you need to investigate and propose the solution on the spot. There are a few different frameworks that you can use for behavioral interviews, and to be honest, it's kind of a matter of preference and practice eventually. And the case study is super popular in consulting. If you go on the YouTube, you will find gazillion videos on the very detailed breakdown on how to crack these case interviews. And finally, approach networking strategically for your career. Be curious about other people's experiences. Talk to people from different industries and in different roles, not from a perception of, I want for this person to recommend me or I want something from that person. Open your mind to a genuine curiosity of how the different industry works, or how is the life in a different function that you've never worked on and you've never witnessed. These types of connections based on mutual curiosity can take you places like nothing else. Now, that makes it for the second layer of value that MBA gives you, and it's soft skills. We spoke about your personal leadership development, the approach to a leadership communication, together with some hopefully helpful tips on how can you approach your further career. And now it is time for the third one. And the third aspect is, in my opinion, not only the most overlooked, but also the most profound and transformative, and it goes beyond hard skills and soft skills, I want to say combined. And I want to start with a story that is a real story that I heard from one of my coaches. Imagine a man that spent years and years of his life developing his career. He worked hard, he went step by step in the corporate ladder. And he found himself in his 40s, maybe somewhere around 45. He found himself in a expensive apartment on the top of the building with a panoramic view on the city, having a high-paid job of the executive position, and feeling the most empty he ever felt in his life. He pursued managerial position because it meant more money, and it also was kind of like a socially acceptable career track, and he was smart and talented, and this is how he just put all of that he got into this flow that he found himself in. And technically you can say he has everything, but he was lost, he was deeply depressed, and did not feel like this life belongs to him. And that's not the saddest part. The saddest part was that this coach mentioned that she has so many clients who are going through exactly the same thing. They followed the path that they did not deliberately choose. They went with the flow, convinced that they're doing the right thing. They put the best efforts, and right now they're having the golden handcuffs because their lifestyle, they're so used to it that even if they would want to change something into something else, they just cannot. Why am I telling you this? An important part of MBA is to anticipate this crisis before it hits you. And this requires the most difficult and the most uncomfortable questions that we need to ask ourselves. All that to identify your purpose and your why, because you learned all kinds of hard skills. You learned all kinds of soft skills. For what? For what are you gonna use it? What is this thing that is worth the time of your life, your energy, your intellectual efforts? Why do you do what you do? You need to formulate your deeper purpose. You need to identify what are the things that you as a human being care about in your life. And also, what type of leader do you even want to be? This journey of self-discovery transforms your leadership from a function to a mission. And there are several practical ways that can help you on this journey. Different techniques. The most known and the most robust, I would say, is Ikigai. Very known. There is also graveyard test or the eulogy tests. This is when you reflect on what would you want to be written on your graveyards, the gravestone on what do you want to be said during your eulogy, right? So what do you want to be remembered for? Reflect on your peak experience and the most worst experiences. Which were the times in your life when you felt the most engaged, the most alive? And the other way around, which were the moments that you felt the most frustrated in your entire time of life? If you do the journaling, you can do the value-driven journaling. Reflect on what are your core values and how can they be possibly connected to your career. All of this will bring you to a purpose-driven leadership, because leaders who are driven by purpose are the most impactful, most resilient, and the most inspiring, because their commitment goes beyond their personal goals and it goes into shaping the future of businesses, the future of society, the future of the world. My personal fear is that in 10, 15, 20 years from now, without purpose-driven leadership, we risk having people in a position of power who, first of all, don't care about anything but themselves, and second of all, don't even understand why they do what they do. And this is not an abstract philosophy. Your clarity on your purpose and all of those questions, it translates into how you lead, it translates into how you treat your team, the types of decisions that you make. It actually matters. So I think MBA does not only teach you how to be powerful, but also challenges you in being responsible with this power. With that, you've reached the very end. Congratulations, it's fantastic. It means that you went through so much, the tremendous amount of helpful content. And that's a lot to take in, but bear with me just for a little bit, because I have something else really important to tell you. First, don't feel that you have to remember all of the things that I spoke about today. You can save this video and you can get back to it on different stages of your career when you will need something more specific. It took a lot of my personal money, time and energy and years after graduation to not only learn it, but practice all of these insights and crystallize them and kind of process it in the best way. Now, if you're not in a position to do an MBA, I can only hope that this video was helpful for you and you got enough tangible frameworks and tips and the inspiration for the mindset shifts that shape top leaders of the future. Although, of course, there is so much more content that I can possibly put in one video. And to be honest, the biggest value for me on MBA was not even the content I was talking about. It was people that I got to know because I did my MBA. The relationship with people, the friends I made, professionally and personally, only that alone made it worth it for me. So if anything in this video inspired you to consider an MBA for yourself, or maybe any other type of professional management path, I will be really happy, because my personal belief is that this world needs more not only professional, but also emotionally intelligent and just genuinely human leaders. Purpose-driven managers that also know what they're doing. And if that's you, now or in the future, I'm happy that we met through the screen. Good luck, and I root for you.